Good morning, everybody. My name's Howard Long, and it's Wednesday, so it's the time to do our weekly devotion, and it's my privilege to bring you a short devotion today. On this beautiful morning, standing out on the banks of the beautiful Dargle stream on our farm here, we surrounded by beautiful big trees, and we want to talk to you a little bit about that this morning. A couple of weeks ago, my wife Cheryl and I had the opportunity to get away for a couple of days. Because of COVID, a lot of the game farms have been offering specials to get away because they have lost all their international trade and their national trade. They could only get people from their own province. So there were lots of really good specials, and we made use of one of those and got away for a few days. We went up to Shishlui in Zululand and spent a couple of days in the bush, and what a blessing it was. Well, it's so nice to get away after the lockdown of not traveling, and just to have a bit of a road trip and go and see a different part of our beautiful country and see all that the lovely game and the bush, the flowers, the trees, and just to get away. It was really great. While we're driving around the game reserve, though, we quite often had to go through the riverbeds to get to where we were going, and the Mduzi River up there in Zululand only runs at certain times after heavy rain, and it's dry most of the time, particularly now this time of year through the winter. And so we would drive through the middle of that riverbed to get around the farm, quite often using it as a road, and that was strange and different, because like today I'm standing on the banks of a stream looking down at the water below me. Usually that's where you see a river. You look down on the river, looking at the water below, and that moment driving around the game reserve, we were in the middle of the river looking out. It gave me a total different perspective of things I hadn't seen before. It's like some of the drone footage you get these days when you see a well-known building or something from the air, and you see it from a different perspective. It looks totally different to the perspective we normally have when we're standing on the ground looking at it. What really caught my attention, though, was the roots of the trees, and the beautiful big trees on the banks of this river. And some of those banks of the river were 15 to 20 meters high, and these beautiful, massive, strong trees standing on top of those banks, and their roots running all the way down the banks into the river below. And that impressed me. And we had a great guide with us who explained a lot of stuff to us while we were going around. And I noticed three things about those roots of those trees as I was going around. And God sort of started speaking to me about it. And I'm really sorry I didn't get a nice photograph of them, because it was quite a sight. But those roots were the stability of the tree. Yet I could see the tree above ground, and I could see the roots below ground, or the exposed roots going into the banks. And I was amazed at the size and the length and the reach of those roots. The tree above ground was a beautiful big tree, but the roots below ground were huge and strong and really spread out. So I was amazed at the size of those roots. And that's obviously where these great big trees, these big beautiful trees, these green healthy trees, got their stability from, was having such a broad base of roots below them. And because of that, that tree was able to provide nesting to the birds and produce fruit. So the animals were nibbling on it, and the ellies were coming along and rubbing against it. Those trees were stable, but they were being used. Secondly, those roots went all the way down the bank into the river below, and you can see this beautiful big tree below me or behind me here, and it's a lovely big tree, and its roots are going right down into the water below. And that's why these trees along the river do so well, because they've got their roots into the water and into that life-giving water that keeps them going. And if you look around you along a normal river, you'll see the beautiful trees, but look a few meters away from the river and see how the trees get smaller. Look a few more meters away and there's often no trees, because the trees that are doing well along the river are there because they have their roots into the water. Those ones that can't get their roots to the water, Those ones that are on their own are small and often insignificant. And the ones far away just don't happen, and they don't make it. And in that hot environment up in Zululand, in the heat, those trees, they really need that water and the nutrition, and they're getting both from the roots. The roots are getting nutrients from the ground, and they're bringing the moisture in to keep them going, to sustain them. The third thing that I noticed, and I hadn't seen this before, and it was quite significant, on one of the bends in the river around a big bank, there was lots of trees, and their roots were interlocked. Their roots hooked into each other, and they supported one another. Their roots were intertwined. So if you tried to pull out one tree, you're actually pulling out all the trees. So they supported one another. And that was a beautiful picture to me as I saw the support they gave to each other and the support they gave to the bank behind them, because that was their life. They needed to be attached to that bank. They needed to be part of that river system to survive. And the way that they all held each other up. And they needed to, because in Zululand, it doesn't rain a little bit of drizzly stuff like we get here in the Dargle. When they get those big downpours in January, February, those rivers come down in spate, in flood, and they get hectic rain. And they need that. They need that to survive, to hold them in the floods and in the heat. You know, as God's people, as Christians, there's more to us than you just see when you look at us. And as God's people, we need to be like those trees. You only see the tree, you don't see the roots. But those that are standing strong in the Lord have to have their roots deep into God and into God's word, so they can stand fast. In Ephesians chapter 3 and verse 17, it says, I pray that you, being rooted and established in love, may have power together with all the saints. Rooted and established. How we need that right now. How we need to be rooted in God. The storms are there. They're coming. It's not will they come, they're here. And we're facing those storms. And if we are not rooted in our God, if we're not rooted in God's word, we're going to find it tough. We're going to be full of fear. We might even get swept away. But those that are rooted in God will be strong. And you see, it said together with all the saints, as God means us to do that. He means us to hold each other up, to link arms, to be in touch with, to encourage one another. The other verse that really I appreciated and I enjoyed was Jeremiah 17 verse 7. It really was a special verse, and it really spoke to me. And it said, blessed is the man who trusts in the Lord, whose confidence is in him. He'll be like a tree planted by streams of water that sends out its roots. It does not fear the heat. Its leaves are always green. It has no worries about the drought, and it produces fruit in season. Never fails to produce fruit in season. I think that's a very special verse, because we can be blessed in difficult days if we're in the right place, if we're in touch with our God, if we're listening to him. We can have confidence when a lot of the people in the world are really shaky right now about what's going on around us. But that's not because of me. That's not because of you. That's not because of us. That's because of who we're trusting in and where our roots are. We don't have to fear the heat. And that heat's intense right now. This really strong heat. It's not easy. And we can have green leaves. And how often do you meet a Christian brother or sister, and you might not know the Christians? You meet these people and they're glowing. They have a strength that you say, wow, that person's got something about them. And later we find out that they're a God person. And that's how we should be. Our leaves should be green. We should be standing strong and not, we are going to get worried. We are going to have issues that we worry about, and that's normal. But we're not going to be swept away by fear because we're well rooted. We also need to be nourished by God's word. and these roots of these trees have got their roots into the water here, and they've got water, but they also need nourishment. And it's so important that we are nourished by God's word. You know, we can say we trust in God and it's all going to work out, and it often does. God works things out for his people. But we need to be making wise decisions. We need to be making decisions that have been thought through prayerfully on our knees before our God, directed by our God, and allowing God's word to influence our thought process, our thinking, and our decision making. And as these trees need water, they need nutrition. And same with us. As we're rooted, we need to be taking up God's word, listening to it, listening to the sermons each Sunday, being involved with our cell groups, being in a place where we can be challenged and fed and blessed. Are you in a place where you're getting fed? Are you in a place where you're getting challenged? We need to make sure that we position ourselves on the banks where we can get our roots in, and not be far away in a place that is dry, a place that is cold, a place that is just doesn't have anything to offer us. We need to be somewhere where God's word is being preached and taught, and we can grow in it. And then we will not be full of fear. We're living in a storm right now, and the wind's blowing. Those winds over the last weekend, particularly on Sunday, they were frightening winds, up to 80, 90 kilometers an hour. And those winds are damaging, and a lot of trees, quite a few trees and branches on my farm fell down, and we had to get the chainsaw and the tractor out and go and clean up and move them away. We don't want to be like that. We don't want to get blown away in the storm. If we are rooted and strong in our God, we will stand. Like this beautiful tree behind me, it's probably 20 to 30 years old at least. It has stood through the storms because of where it's positioned itself, because of where it's got its roots. The heat is intense all around us. Very few people are untouched by COVID. Very few people are not affected by the difficulties that are going on around us. But thanks to be our God who strengthens us, who keeps us strong. When we put our roots in the right place, when we get the wisdom from the right place, he enables us and helps us. As a church, we've had to do things in a different way in the last few months. The new normal people are talking about, and we're not sure what the new normal is, and we hope and pray we will get back to fellowship in our churches soon in a way that we had before, but we're not sure about that. That we'll see, and that's in God's hands. But a lot of the things we've trusted in over the last years have let us down. Our government has found it, and governments all over the world have found it difficult to make decisions because they don't know what to do. They've never faced this before. And now they're facing difficulties, and in retrospect, they look back at decisions they've made. They haven't always been best for all the people. So the things that we trust in don't always hold up. The finances haven't held up. People's health hasn't held up amongst COVID. We haven't had a resistance to it. But our roots in God has held us strong. I want to go back to those verses in Jeremiah and just repeat those to you as I close now. Blessed is the man or woman who puts their trust in the Lord, whose confidence is in him. Like a tree planted by streams of water, it sends out its roots. It does not fear the heat. Its leaves always remain green. It has no worries of the drought. It never fails to produce fruit. I pray that might be true of us, that we will not be fearful, that we will remain green and joyful and positive because of our God, because of what he does for us, because of the wisdom he gives us, because of the strength he gives us, and that we will produce fruit. We will support those around us. We will link our arms together in whatever way we can in this new normal. We'll support one another as we trust in our God. Thank you for being with me today and listening, and I pray that will be a blessing to you. God bless you. Bye-bye.